right, so today I'm here with Jim Lang, and I will have him start by introducing himself and what he would like to talk with me about.
Thank you for having me, Jennifer. My name's Jim Lang. I'm a CPA and an attorney, and I've been doing this for over 35 years. And I'm also the father of a child with a disability. And when it became clear that our daughter, Erica, who has dysautonomia, which will make it very difficult for her to ever work or to support herself, the challenge for me and my wife was, well, how do we support her not only during our lifetime, but if she can never work, how can we support her for the rest of her life, which could easily be 40, 50 years after we are gone? And then I did come up with a solution based on my background um, of financial planning strategies, IRA, Secure Act, etc. And then after I came up with my solution, I wanted to tell and share the world my solution to help other parents with a child with a disability. So we wrote a book, um,
Mm-hmm.
which I humbly believe is the best book there is for, at least for the financial side, for parents of a child with a disability. And then we're also having a summit, a 3-day summit where we're gathering a group of experts, not only the three authors, but we also have a celebrity speaker and other experts in a variety of subcategories of um, for parents with a child with a disability. So that's the short answer. And if you wanted to lead with some questions, that would be fine. If you want me to just go on,
Oh, yeah, I'll lead with
I'll do it.
some.
I'll do it however you like.
Okay, thank you. I'll lead with some questions because I was curious with your daughter Erica. I don't think I've heard of dysautonomium. Is that what you said?
Dysautonomia.
Dysautonomia. I don't think I've heard of that
Yeah,
before.
dysautonomia is somebody who has dysautonomia typically has problems with the autonomic nervous system and things that we think of as routine that we don't pay any attention to, nor do we even really think about much. Things like blood pressure, heartbeat, um,
Mm,
other things that happen automatically that for most people work correctly. And in her case, they do not. And that brings up a variety of symptoms in a variety of ways. It's often combined with some form of depression because people are not physically able to do what others can. And it's a very challenging condition. And at least in our daughter's case, unless there's a major reversal, it is not likely that she will be able to work and support herself. If you met her and you could have a conversation with her for a half hour, and you might not, and if this topic didn't come up, you might think that she's fine. You'd think, oh, she's a
hmm
very bright young lady. Um, but then after that half hour, she would be exhausted. She would have to crash.
mm,
She and she might not be up for that half hour. It might just depend on the day and what else is going on. So it's a very serious condition. It's actually more common, or variations of it are more common than we might think. Um, but while we do everything we can to help her physically, um, frankly, that's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is how to help other parents with children, either like her or with invisible learning challenge or other disabilities, how they can best provide for their child. And let's say one of the side benefits of this is not only will you feel better, just like my wife and I did
hmm
after we came up with a plan, but depending on the child's cognitive functions, they will feel better. Our daughter is just so happy because she was, really worried. Well, what's going to happen when mom and dad die? Is there going to be roof over my head? Is there going to be food on the table? If
Right.
and even better, if there's some alternative therapy or if there is something that I need, am I going to be able to afford that?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. I was also curious, did you know your daughter had her disability when she was born, or did it come about later?
No, it developed. So during the first maybe 10 to 12 years, it wasn't perfect, but we thought that she was going to be fine. And then, and frankly, it was misdiagnosed. It was diagnosed early as just depression without a physical problem.
Mm,
And then we took her to a lot of specialists all over the country, which I think is not all that unusual when you have a difficult to diagnose problem and you're a concerned parent. But, you
of
know,
course.
we traveled to a lot of different clinics um, in a variety of states, seeing a variety of different specialists, including some alternative people that didn't really help. Um, and we've kind of made peace with, well, okay, she does have this problem. How can we best support her physically? And then again, not my area of expertise. I'm not an MD. I have no specialized medical knowledge, but I do have specialized medical financial knowledge in
Hmm.
terms of qualifying for government benefits, in terms of estate planning, and in terms of strategies like Roth IRA conversions.
Yeah. So, it sounds like while you were helping your daughter with growing up with her learning, uh, um, with her disability, or as I like to call it, learning challenge, that sound like that's what inspired you to write your book.
Yeah, it did because after we came up with what I'll call the solution that we can get into, um, you know, it just made such a difference in our lifestyle. The the relief of not worrying about our daughter. Not that we're not going to worry, because of course we're parents, we're always going to worry.
Hmm.
But at least now we can worry about some of the non-financial issues instead of worrying about her not having it. So, we're number crunchers as CPAs, and frankly, we're financial strategists. And the difference between with investments being the same, taxes being the same, everything else being the same, the difference between somebody using our strategies that we came up with and somebody not, in my daughter's case, would be the difference between her running out of money and her having $1.9 million dollars. Now, to be fair, my wife and I probably have more than maybe the average person, but even somebody with a $500,000 IRA, the difference between using our strategies and not in today's dollars is $239,000.
Wow.
So if it's not costing you money and you have the possibility of, even if you have $500,000, of having your kid be better off by $239,000, and that's in today's dollars, not future dollars. In
Hmm.
future dollars, it'd probably be a million or something like that. Um, it, it's this is a major difference in the quality of life for you not having to worry about it, and for your child who will have that additional money and resources. So it just became a very natural thing, since I've written 10 books any boat way, to write a book just for this. And I took, in effect, the best of the 10 books I had, and then I got two co-authors who filled in some of my substantial knowledge gaps. And so we've kind of put together this one great resource that I would like to make available without charge to your audience. We didn't talk about that, but I'm not here to sell books. I'm here to frankly give away books, if anything, and give away information in the hopes that it can have an impact for somebody.
Yes, thank you. I think Sandy mentioned to me that you were willing to give away a digital copy. I appreciate that.
Yes. No, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. Um, so why don't you start telling me about your book then, and what it does?
Okay, well, again, it's called Retire Secure for parents of a child with a disability.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, um, and I think it covers three areas that are critical to the solution. And I'd like to go over the three areas, and then I'd like to talk about some of the specialty areas for people with invisible learning challenge.
Of
Because
course.
we spoke for a few minutes before we went live. I learned a little bit which is what things I already suspected, and I actually, did a little bit of research, but you confirmed. So I'm going to give you first the general information that would apply to anybody with a child with a disability. And then after we do that, then we'll talk about specifically people with invisible learning challenge. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. So the first thing is whether your child can qualify for government benefits. And while I'm going to concentrate on what I call, or actually what Debbie McFadden calls the golden ticket. Debbie
Mm-hmm.
McFadden was the Commissioner of Disabilities under the H.W. Bush administration. She had 400 attorneys working for her, which sounds like a total nightmare to me. Um, Anybody but attorneys, and 400 of them just sounds awful. But anyway, she has developed a deep expertise in helping people qualify for government benefits. So, depending on um, the degree of disability, and also, I hate to say it, but depending on the knowledge and the skill of the person applying for the
Mm-hmm.
government benefits, there can be a huge benefit to qualifying your child for SSI or SSDI. First, there's a cash benefit that I should know. It's something like $900 a month with SSDI, a little bit higher. But it also opens the door for medical benefits and Medicare and health insurance and education benefits and um, equipment benefits, if appropriate, um, and major estate planning benefits, which would have a long-term implication after the parents are gone. So to me, that is the first issue. Now, if you have, let's say, a minor problem, and maybe you have a child that doesn't function quite as well, or not as quickly, or needs special attention, but ultimately, and maybe they're not going to be a rocket scientist, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe they would have an okay job. And the degree of their disability is not that great. They're probably not going to be able to qualify. Now, we have some strategies for folks like that, but that would not be nearly, we can't make a $1.9 million difference for a child like that. All right. We
Mm-hmm.
can if the child would qualify for these government benefits. So that's the first thing that you should know. And Debbie likes to say, hey, somebody says, hey, my child lost a finger, what can you do? That's she can't do anything because that child would be able to get a job and have a relatively normal life.
Mm-hmm.
But if the child, the degree of disability is sufficient that that child, for example, would not likely be able to work or would need a lot of special help in school, etc., then that child very well might qualify for benefits. And the other area that I don't have an expertise on that Debbie does is something called vocational rehabilitation, which is a different type of government benefit, but that would be more in the area of tuition and college and things for a child that might have a disability that might not qualify for SSI or SSDI. So the first thing to do, and here's the other thing, a lot of times you find a parent who is kind of proud and they want to tell you about what their child can do. Oh,
Right.
he needed an extra half hour on the test, but he got an A,
Mm-hmm.
or well, and it's just natural for us as parents to want to celebrate what our children can do. And I think that we
Yes.
should be thinking like that, but not if you're trying to get government benefits. If you're trying to get government benefits, it's what your child can't do. So Debbie
Mm-hmm.
McFadden uses the example of her two daughters who both qualified for disability. One was a basically a one-legged rock climber, champion,
Wow.
Olympic champion. Now, certainly a woman like that can get up a flight of steps. Well, she didn't say, oh, she can get up a flight of steps. She said she can't get up a flight of steps in the normal way.
Mm.
So there, you're going against your parental instincts and you're arguing what your child can't do, which makes it much more likely that they will qualify for a benefit.
That makes sense.
So that's number one. And I don't know anybody in the world who knows more about it than Debbie. Debbie wrote a fabulous section in the book that was included. Um, and she does have a service that she helps people. I don't get a nickel for referring that service, but I want to give your audience, and the other thing is she's very straightforward. If it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
no, she won't waste your time and money. She has her record is so good that I didn't want to put it out there because I said somebody's going to challenge it and you're going to have to defend this incredibly high percentage of success.
Mm.
Um, but anyway, so that's the first thing. The second thing is you really need to get your estate planning right. If your child does qualify for a government benefit, you will likely need something called a special needs trust. And the idea of that trust is that you want to preserve your child's government benefit both while you're alive and after you're gone. But if you just left that money to your child outright, for example, SSI, it's a poverty program. Your child can't have more than say $2,000 worth of money. So if you leave the money to a child without a trust, that's going to blow their government benefit. And if they've already received some government benefits, the government might go into that pot and say, "Hey, we want to be reimbursed."
Mm.
Let's just say that you have a regular trust. Maybe you got the will done before you knew your child had a disability. So you have a typical minor's trust. Well, one half at 25, one half at 30. We terminate the trust at 35. Or you even have a spendthrift trust, which might be tempting for parents to do, which is to say, well, we're never going to leave the child the money outright, but we're going to empower the trustee to use the money for the health maintenance and support of the child. Well, that kind of trust will also blow the government benefits. So we don't
Mm-hmm.
want that kind. We want a special needs trust. And I'll talk about some of the specialty areas for people with, say, a learning challenge. And the third thing, and this is really my area of expertise, is we want to get the financial strategies right. If the child does have a disability, there are certain financial strategies, many of which are familiar to many people, but not familiar to the parent with a child with a disability folks. And interestingly enough, it's Roth IRA conversions. And I could go into the details of why a Roth IRA conversion is so important for a child with a disability. With the risk of getting too technical, it is because that child will be able to stretch or defer the inherited tax-free Roth IRA over their lifetime compared to a child that doesn't have a disability that would have to take it out in 10 years.
Right.
Even then, we're still doing it for a lot of, I mean, frankly, that's what I've been doing for the last, since 1998. That's my
Mm-hmm.
specialty area is helping people with Roth IRA conversions. And we very frequently do them for people who have children that don't have any disability, but we can't make a $1.9 million difference for a lot of those folks, but we can for a child with a disability. So those are the three um, really critical areas to get right.
Okay. And uh you were already touching on this a little bit, but maybe you can go into it more. The impact that uh if the parents follow the steps you recommend, the impact that it will have for their child or children if they
Well,
have
the,
more
the
than one.
difference could be running out of money versus being broke.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and again, the psychological benefit for both the parent and the child. What I'd like to do now is focus on what what might be specific to your specific audience, which is parents of a child with invisible learning challenge, if that's
Right.
okay.
Yeah,
Would
of
that be the
course.
next relevant thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we were talking before, you said that there are um, children, it's not just either you have it or you don't. It's maybe a little bit like autism where there might be more of a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that you said is it's not necessarily easy to predict the a degree of function that a child will have, let's say in adulthood, and that might change one way or the other. That is maybe a
Right.
child who is not able to support themselves, maybe gets the appropriate training, etc., and then does much better. Or maybe there's a trauma in that child's life and they actually do worse. So now, what do you do as a parent? And let me tell you what one of the issues that and I'm going to, let's say, attack my own solution that I just offered. I
Mm-hmm.
talked about a special needs trust, which is a wonderful and necessary type of trust if your child's getting a government benefit and you want to preserve that government benefit. Well, what if your child doesn't qualify for that government benefit? Maybe you thought they did, or maybe your child qualifies for it now, but does better, which is our hope, and doesn't qualify for it later in their lifetime because they're doing better.
Right.
And now you have this special needs trust, which is very, very restrictive. Remember, the child can't really have their own money
Mm-hmm.
for SSI. So you have the child that has this very restrictive trust, and there's no particular need for those restrictions because you don't have the government benefit. In that case, and let's say that you still want to have a trust because let's say the child still has some problems and you don't want to just leave the money outright to the child to do something inappropriate. And in that case, you would want, let's call it a standard creditors trust, to
Mm-hmm.
protect the child from creditors and frankly, to protect the child from themselves. And also, by the way, to protect the child from a future ex-spouse.
Mm.
We even call it the I don't want my no good daughter-in-law to inherit one red cent of my money trust. So, and they're all some variation of a creditor protection trust. So now we have two types of trusts that we can be thinking about. One is this creditor protection trust, and two is a special needs trust. And they
Mm-hmm.
have different purposes and they have significant differences for the child once you're gone. And by the way, these are what I'm referring to are called testamentary trusts, meaning these trusts are typically not funded or they're just a piece of paper in a safety deposit box until one or both parents are gone.
Mm. Okay.
So the question now is, well, gee, Jim, I'm not sure. Maybe right now my child does qualify for SSI, or maybe right now they don't, but they might in the future, or go the other way. Yes, they qualify now, but we're hoping that the child will do better and will not need um, these government benefits and will be able to be a functioning member of society that will be able to have a job, etc. So how do you pick which one? And If you pick one and then the child's situation changes, then you have to go back and change your will. And then what happens if the child situation changes after you're gone?
Right.
And the child ends up with the wrong type of trust. So there's a trust or a variation of a trust called a toggle. So let's say that you want a regular creditor's protection trust.
Mm-hmm.
The trustee has the power to toggle to use that type of trust. Then let's say there's a downturn and the child does qualify for government benefits, in which case you want the special needs trust. Then you turn the toggle and now it's a special needs trust.
Mm.
And the trustee is going to have, and it's, you give the power to the trustee who, I'm kind of a cheapskate, so I tend to not prefer corporate organizations, although I think there are some good corporate organizations for children with disabilities. Um, but whether it's, one of those groups or a traditional bank or trust company or, a caring relative, um, by the way, for whatever it's worth, as an estate attorney, let's even just say outside the disability world, we typically will use siblings,
Mm-hmm.
um, unless there's problems with that. There's usually some, but usually the sibling is going to know what's going on in the life of the child much better than anybody else
Of course.
and is going to really care about the child. But anyway, forgetting about the choice of trustee, giving the trustee the ability to toggle back and forth, that is really the key to effective estate planning. And I hate to say this, and I, by the way, do not have an estate planning firm anymore. I can refer people to one, but so I'm not out here trying to sell wills and sell these trusts. I'm just trying to, in effect, provide great information, at least in this area. Um, it it's a specialty area.
Mm-hmm.
Like I even have a friend who has a child with a disability, and I was explaining this toggle trust because his child is, let's call it, on the border and could go either
Mm.
way. He said, well, that's a great idea. I'm going to go back to the attorney that I had do my will because I liked him and I thought he was competent. And I said, no, you really want to go to a specialist in this area. Now, that might sound like I'm taking away, and maybe the estate attorney that you go to, maybe he could figure it out, maybe he could learn it. But even when I did have an estate planning firm, and we did 3,000 wills, if a parent with a child with a disability came to us, I would say we don't have the expertise to do an estate plan for that child. We want to see you go to a specialist. All right. Now, one of the co-authors of the book, I didn't even write the section on estate planning in the book. One of the co-authors, she is a specialist, and
Mm.
that's what she does. Now, she's only licensed in Pennsylvania, and both of us have some connections both in Pennsylvania and in other states. And the estate attorney must be licensed in the state where the parent um, is a resident. But she just had so much expertise, and she's done so many of them. It's like many areas of the law and even the subspecialty of estate planning. To me, I either want to go to somebody who's done 100 of them, or, you know, and as an estate attorney, we chose, well, we don't have 100 people to do this. This is before I got into the parent with a child with a disability area.
Mm-hmm.
So we just said, we're not going to try to be experts at everything. We're just going to refer that out. So that might not be as helpful to people as they want, but I'll just say that um, it would be risky going to an estate attorney that doesn't have that area of expertise. Also, you have other issues that are much tougher. The guardianship issue is much tougher for a child with a disability. Um, things like, For example, Julie Steinbacher, her office, they actually have social workers on staff because a
Mm.
lot of the problems aren't really legal. It's dealing with the government and administration and getting these benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a specialty area.
That makes sense to me because it sounds like if you didn't go to somebody who was a specialist, they might not get it, all the different details correct
Yeah, and
necessarily.
I hate to say it, and I'm not going to say that every specialist is going to get it right either.
Hmm.
You know, we have a service that's basically what we call a financial master plan. And even though we don't practice law, I can't help myself. I have to look at somebody's will and trust, and I'm rarely happy with them,
Mm.
even for a child that doesn't have a disability. So it's really important to use the right person.
Yeah.
And choosing the right person that is another challenge.
Yeah, that it does sound like that would be. And I can understand where you were coming from with your friend who said that their child was kind of on the border of needing it or not needing it, because usually somebody with invisible learning challenge, whether it's autism or ADHD or maybe dyslexia, or maybe it's you know, for me it's nonverbal learning disability. Um, it's it's very hard to tell that it's obvious that they have a learning disability or challenge. So that's where I think qualifying for SS or SSDI.
SSI or
Yeah.
SSDI.
Yeah. Where that might be more challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, for our daughter, we didn't meet Debbie until after we lost our first um you know application,
Hmm.
and then when which most people do, and then we appealed, and the attorney figured like relatively before the trial that we were going to lose, and then they fired us.
Mm.
And my wife probably put 1,000 hours into developing the medical case.
Wow.
That if she had known what she was doing, it would have been a lot less. But she just meticulously, and we qualified for SSDI, which is more difficult than SSI, and I don't want to get into the distinction, but
Hmm.
I'll just say go